Shabbat Shalom. So, as I said in answer to a question during my introduction, I really want to look a little bit more at the question of what it means when it says that Noah was righteous in his generation, right? And does that mean, like I said, is that damning by faint praise, or is it, or is it a statement that, if he had been righteous while living among such an evil generation, how much more righteous he would have been in a different context, right? And I do think that a lot of life is contextual. For example, I have a friend who is a Haredi rabbi in Baltimore who grew up in Mobile, Alabama. And, he remarked that his father was the only Jew in Mobile, Alabama who didn't work on Shabbat, right? And frankly, that says something. It's, right, it's easy. You live in New York City, you live in Baltimore, right? All right, I work on Shabbat, right? But if you don't want to work on Shabbat, you really don't have to for the most part. If you're a doctor, but generally, right, working on Shabbat is a choice. In a previous generation, it wasn't a choice, and all the more so in a place like Mobile as opposed to a place like New York, right? But nobody would say, oh yeah, my father kept Shabbat in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Well, big deal. Everybody keeps Shabbat in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, right? So, so there are certain things that are contextual, right? Or a kid comes home and says, I went to Camp Ramah and I put on tefillin 6 mornings a week. Okay, great. And it is. You didn't have much of a choice. They made you do it, right? Put on tefillin now when nobody's making you do it. That to me says something a little bit more, right? It's a little bit contextual. And I have to, this is not directly relevant, but it's a great story anyway. So again, the story I heard from college. So this kid comes back from Camp Ramah and everything was great, but the highlight of the week was Havdalah. Right? I love Havdalah. Havdalah was the most fantastic thing ever. I just loved it, and I can't wait to go back next summer to do Havdalah again. And the rabbi says, well, you could do Havdalah here. And the kid says, no, can't do Havdalah here. We don't have a lake. We don't have a lake. They did Havdalah by the lake, and that's what made it special. Right? You can't do Havdalah here because we don't have a lake. Okay? And so, but that's also like context matters, right? Context matters, right? You can do Havdalah even if you don't have a lake, right? But as I really dove into this question, I have become convinced that in point of fact, the statement righteous in his generation is indeed damning by faint praise. Okay, there's a commentator called Al-Sheikh, and he says that Noah was righteous only by the standards of his generation, not in any absolute sense. Okay, and his proof text is the second sentence of the Parsha. right? It's the second sentence, but it's still part of verse 1, right? So it says, Ele toldot Noach, these are the generations of Noah. Noach ish tzaddik. Noah was a righteous man. Tamim haya b'dorotav. He was upright in his generation. Et ha-Elohim hithalech Noah. Noah walked with God. Okay, you say, okay, so what is, but he compares it to Abraham because God says to Abraham, Lech lifanai, walk before me, right? Like a kid who walks with their parent and their parent is holding the kid's hand, right? Because the kid can't stand on their own, right? But if the parent says, walk before me, then kid is able to stand on his own, right? And so I want to dive into that a little bit more, right? So God says to Noah, I'm going to bring a flood and I'm going to wipe out everything that is alive except for a handful of animals that you're going to, and you and your family. So in order to save you and your family, make an oath. I'm going to kill everybody but you and your family. And what does Noah say? What does Noah say? What does he say?
Okay.
No. He doesn't say anything. Right? He doesn't say anything. It is not recorded that he said anything. He built an ark. God says, I'm going to kill everybody but you and your family, so build an ark. Noah builds an ark. God says to Abraham, right, I'm going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. What does Abraham say? Don't. Right? Don't do that. Right? Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat. Right? Shall the judge of the whole world not act justly? Right? Yeah.
Doesn't a similar situation exist with Moses in terms of not destroying any of the people, or is there a correlate there?
I'm not recalling such a thing, but I mean, maybe it's a midrash that you know that I don't know, something you read somewhere. But right, but the point is, right, that Abraham speaks up. Right? He speaks up against God. Right? Against God because he perceives that God is acting unjustly. Right? Now, which is a whole other question, right? Can God act unjustly? Right? You could say, if God does it, then it is ipso facto just, right? But that's not what Abraham thinks. And he tries to convince God not to do it, right? So Noah, right, it says Noah walked with God. Noah was concerned about his relationship with God, and he was concerned with his family, but not anything else, right? In other words, right, but Abraham said, wait, but this isn't right. This isn't right. It isn't fair, right? And he tries, right? And they have this whole negotiation. All right, well, what if there's 50 righteous people? All right, 50. Well, so, for the lack of 10 people, you're going to kill the whole city? What if there's 40, right? Gets them down to 10, and there aren't even 10, right? But Abraham tried. Abraham tried, and, so obedience may be a virtue, but it's not the only virtue, right? God didn't create us to be robots. It's not enough to simply do what we're required to do, right? Yeah.
I don't get the Isaac thing, and Abraham's willing to.
Neither do I. Neither do I.
That argument, I don't understand.
What did you say?
Isaac, he's willing to sacrifice his son because he feels like he has to do what God said.
Right. He speaks up for Sodom and Gomorrah, but he doesn't speak up for Isaac.
Okay, I just didn't hear.
Okay.
Right, yeah, and I agree, that is puzzling, right? That is very puzzling. I mean, there are all kinds of midrashim that explain that he did, or, whatever, but at least in the text, without diving into the midrash, yes, that is problematic, is definitely problematic, okay? But the point is, Noah didn't sin. He did not sin. He did everything that was required of him, but nothing more, right? Nothing more, and that's fine, okay? He's not a sinner, but not being a sinner doesn't make you righteous. It makes you just neutral, right? Just neutral, okay? And what I would say that Noah was, there is this category called Naval Birshut HaTorah. Okay, Naval Birshut HaTorah, generally we translate this as a scoundrel with the permission of the Torah. Okay, what does that mean? It means exactly that, right? You didn't break any rules. You didn't break any rules, but simply not breaking any rules doesn't make you a good person.
Sounds like lawyers.
I'll get there. No, you're exactly right. I mean, I knew the phrase, but I didn't know like where it came from, okay? Until I started working on this Drasha. Okay, so, and I thought it was from Maimonides. It's not, it's from Nachmanides, okay? Not Rambam, but Ramban. And so Naval, which, like I said, we normally translate as scoundrel, but Naval was actually the name of a person. Okay, in the first book of Samuel, he was a wealthy farmer, and David and his army, they are simultaneously fighting the enemies of Israel and King Saul for David's life. And David comes to Naval and says, I and my men were starving, please give us food. And Naval says, no. And David says, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. But David's wife, Abigail, says, look, you can't kill him. He hasn't broken any law, right? He hasn't broken any law. And if you kill him, you're bringing sin upon yourself, right? Because there is no law that says you have to feed fleeing people, right? And there to this day, I mean, if you refuse to give charity, you haven't broken any law, right? That's why it's called charity, right? Now, charity and tzedakah are not the same thing, right? And, taxes Right, and look, there is a whole question about tithing, taxes, et cetera, because a certain percentage of our tax money goes to feed hungry people, right? Except when Congress is shut down, right? Or provide health care, et cetera, et cetera. It's, right, it's for sure, okay? So this is what Rabbi Brad Artson writes about Naval B'Shut HaTorah. Ramban says a Jew should be held to a higher standard than the mere requirements of the law. You should do beyond what is required, and that's where Nachmanides develops this phrase that Rabbi Artson says he has not found it anywhere earlier than Nachmanides, of Naval B'Shut HaTorah. He didn't do anything that the law didn't allow. There was no law that obligated him to feed David. He only did what he was legally required, but that's not enough, right? Doing what you are legally required to do is a floor. It's not a ceiling, right? And so when other people are doing evil, and we sit and we watch, and that's really bad. That's really bad. But what are you doing about it, right? And there is no law that says you have to do something to stop it. In fact, the law could say otherwise, right? As we see, right? People who are trying to stop evil are being arrested, right? Ministers praying are being shot in the head with pepper balls, right? And, I'm kind of jealous. I haven't been shot in the head with a pepper ball yet.
Rabbi.
But it's not enough to simply not break the law. Yeah, Lloyd.
I'm going to focus what you just said into current events. Should we not be speaking up about what's going on in the West Bank and residents burning neighbors' farms, if that is true?
Yeah, I think we should be.
Louder.
Yes. I mean, the question is how loud, right? And the question is, what can we do beyond just speaking up? Okay, but I don't necessarily publicize everything that I do. No. I mean, because I do it as an individual, not as a representative of the shul. But there have been rabbinic protests against the things that the extremists, not all, but extremist settlers are doing. I sign them, right? I mean, has it helped at all? But yes, I agree with you. Right, I agree with you that when evil is being done, and especially when evil is being done by fellow Jews, right, we should speak up, right? We should speak up, but we should also, speak up from a point of knowledge, right? Speak up from a point of knowledge, but that's precisely, in other words, that's the point about being B'nai Avraham and not B'nai Noach, is that it's not enough to simply do what you're required to do. And since you asked that question, and I'll wrap up with this, okay, I have a friend who, he made Aliyah, he lived in Israel for a long time. He's teaching now at a university in the States, but he has the his 3 daughters, his grandchildren still live in Israel. It goes back and forth a lot. But when he served in the IDF in what's called Handasat Pravi. Handasat Pravi means battle engineering. Now, what is battle engineering? Blowing stuff up, right? So he is fighting in the IDF in the Lebanon War in 1982, and they get to a village where the inhabitants have fled. It is a completely empty village, but literally with food still on the stove, right? People just got up and fled, and smartly so, right? So the commander of my friend Irie's unit says, great, we can blow up a bunch of houses and not hurt anybody, right? And we could use the practice, right? We could use the practice and we could do it without hurting anybody because they fled. And my friend Irie goes to his commander and he says, you know and I know that this is against IDF regulations. Right, we both know this, okay? A, I'm not participating. B, if you have the unit do it anyway, I am reporting you up the chain of command. And they didn't do it. They didn't do it. It takes, in this case, one person to speak up, and great evil would be permitted, right? But, so, and what I'm saying, right, in other words, if you do the bare minimum, you have not violated any laws. But simply not violating any laws doesn't make you a good person. Makes you neutral, okay? And sometimes neutral is not bad, right? But, this is why Abraham is at a higher level and God says, walk before me, whereas Noah simply walked with God, right? And that is why, we Jews, we're called B'nai Avraham. We're not called B'nai Noah. And that's why, because, like Hebrew National, we're held to a higher standard. Okay. Shabbat Shalom. Yeah.
You said something earlier. What is the difference between charity and tzedakah? That's the first question.
Okay, so charity is voluntary. Caritas means it's right from the heart. Tzedakah is not voluntary. It is legally required. Okay, as the word said, right? Justice, right, is legally required. Okay, it's not voluntary. If you are a Jew, you are required to give tzedakah. Okay, so that's the difference. All right.
You turn off the recording.
Yeah.